Hey, Jay here. We're going to talk clutches on this clutch install on this KTM 300 right now. Okay, we're going to install a Rekluse clutch in this bike. And I know everybody's thinking automatically an auto clutch. Rekluse doesn't just make auto clutches. They're kind of best known for auto clutches, but they also make more of a conventional clutch that's been updated and improved a lot. They call it a torque drive. It has more plates, thinner plates, and on this 300, it's the same clutch pack as the KTM 450. They run the same number of plates. So that thickness is the same. So these tips and tricks will help you for a lot of other bikes. We're going to go through it step by step and show you how we would install a new clutch. We're going to spec this clutch. We suspect after some of the hill climbing we've been doing recently and sand riding that this clutch is going to be a little bit worn. So we're going to put a new one in right now. At the same time, we're going to add a Blais Racing clutch weight to give it some of that tractable power. We want this thing to feel a little bit more luggy without, a flywheel weight. We've all heard of that. Well, this little clutch weight is a pretty inexpensive way to add a little bit more mass and weight to the clutch pack to help it feel more tractable. So hopefully that'll help you out. We're going to get this going. One of the first things I like to do is get my clutch plates soaking in oil before we get started so that they're all pre-soaked, and we put them in individually like this so the oil gets in between each plate. Okay, so I like to get really organized, and with the Rekluse, it is much different than the stock clutch setup. So you really want to read your instructions. It's very important. They give you some really good tips, and they really explain it out really well. So in this case, we have 2 thinner plates for the bottom, 2 thinner plates for the top. They're going to sandwich our fiber plates. And then we have 48 thousandths. These are 40s, and these are 48 thousandths that are all going in the middle of this stack. So it's nice to get kind of organized here so you don't mess up. And I still got my fiber ones soaking. We also have our clutch weight ready with the screws that it'll take to put that together. So I like to have the the brake spring off, and then I'll push the master with the caliper with my left hand, and then I can push down on the brake and get it out of the way. We typically run the Fast Company brake spring, which I really like. I like to just pop these loose, make sure they feel okay and everything's good before putting my gun to it. Rado jammed his brake pedal in here on a little tip over, I'm sure. These bolts are looking a little old. Okay, so now at this point, the clutch system on these KTMs is a pretty good one. This bevel spring, one big spring. Now, one thing you'll notice on the clutch, this top little plate, it has 3 little marks. We typically will run it in the middle mark. It has a 1, 2, or 3. These little lines right here are what you're looking for to set the clutch, and usually the middle is just fine. So now I'm pulling this off. I'm going to set this out of my way. Now there's a little spring right here which a lot of people don't notice, and it does have a top written on it. So you can get that upside down, so you want to not do that. Then at this point, I just go ahead and pull these pins out. And this is the difference between to a Japanese bike. Doesn't have those pins. Okay, so then at this point, I'm going to pull out all the plates that I can. This pipe spring puller might help us out too. So she got hot, nothing terrible. I like to keep it in the same order, and it smells a little bit burnt. I'll get a little pick for the last one, usually, but I was able to get it with here. So this is our stock one. So we drain the oil first, and we use that cool tool. Tokyo Off-Road has one, and so does Bulletproof Designs. That cool tool, because taking these skid plates off of these some of these 2-strokes like this is kind of a pain, so we try to avoid taking the skid plate off if we can avoid it. So since we have the clutch apart, and I'm letting my clutch soak as long as I can right now. So I'm just going to put oil in, and we've already measured out our oil. We run about 850 in these, which is a little bit more than they recommend. People always ask me to check on that sight hole or anything. I never do. We just put in the right amount and don't worry about it. With the clutch plates in here, it can kind of run over down here, so it's a little easier with the clutch plates not in yet. Okay, when I put these little dowels in, it's really easy to drop these in the engine compartment, and that's why Rado's filming and I'm putting these in. Right, Rado? Exactly. So I put a tiny bit of grease on them, just a little bit to hold them in place while you're working with it. I found that there is little holes down in there to keep it in place, but this just gives you a little bit more grippingness. I looked at those instructions, and this check mark is the angle. That's kind of a good way to remember. And I put the order correctly here. So now I can just grab them and put them on just like so. So I have them all in the right order. And now my plates that are soaking, I have them in this oil down here. And what I usually do is stand them up a little bit and try not to make too big of a mess, and just drop them in like so. Now you can kind of push on the actuator. Sometimes this piece, this whole little top hat piece, can want to come out on you and stick to this when you pull the pressure plate off. So you just make sure you get her back on there good. Just hold this in here like so. And then again, I didn't take this off, but if you do, if you're someone like me, you got to get some really good glasses on to see the word top on there if you get it backwards. So I like to put the bolt in our Blais weight, and then I slide it into the number 2. So that's going to get us lined up, and I'll usually put 2 in like this, and I'll try to get that kind of lined up here. And this thing can be a little tricky to get seated correctly, but you get the hang of it. I just felt it go to its home right there. And you have to run their screws because of the different length. And they typically this will work with a stock cover on most bikes. I think some of the gas models where the cover is dished in, I've heard guys saying that it hits. So, but with the stock covers, it's been fine. And of course, with the larger Rekluse one, no problem. So on that 1, 2, and 3 on that plate, that'll determine your feel. So 2's the middle, 1 would be a lighter pull, 3 would be a harder, stronger pull. Also what that means is if you're in 1, it's a lighter pull, you could be more apt to wear out your clutch quicker. So if you're wearing out clutches a little bit quicker, you want a little more resistance, you're going to want to go to 3. Okay. We find that 2 has been just fine in most applications. These KTM clutches are so good that the basket setup, everything is so good. And with this torque drive and this weight, we think it's pretty dang good. Okay, so we're ready to drop our cover back on. I made sure that O-ring is still in good condition. So what I like to do is I like to hold this thing. It doesn't have, so see how it moves? I like to kind of feel it get centered, keep some pressure on the middle of it. And it moved a little bit there with my gun. So I'm not gonna get it right to a good spot. And then I can go through and just feel that each one's good and snug. The one hand on the T-handle is kind of a good gauge for me, but just like that, okay? And then I like to, we're gonna wipe off our grease there, oil. Okay, and then we got our new oil in. I always say it's a good idea to write down your hours. Rattle does a real good job of that, right?
Of course, 320 right now.
So we put our spring back on. These springs can break the stock. You can run a Honda one, is stronger, but with our brake lever, the way we run them up high here, they don't have much problems. All right, so that's a wrap. It's not too tough a job if you take your time, follow the instructions. Pretty cool deal. We're gonna go. You know, I like to make sure this feels good. Whenever I do a job like this, I'm gonna go start the bike, ride it around, make sure everything feels good before I take it out for a real ride out in the hills. Feels good.
Does it?
Yeah, I think you'll be in good shape. Ready to go attack some good trails.